our model in our own spiritual journey is more important even than our words. If they see us living out what we say we believe, they're far more likely to accept what we're saying. Mm. But if they see us saying we believe one thing, but they see in us that we're not following through with what we say we believe, it's harder for them to respect what we have to say.
We're with Dr. Gary Chapman, and you've written this book, Things I Wish I'd Known Before My Child Became a Teenager. Dr. Gary, I'm right smack dab in the middle of what you're talking about. So,
all right.
I wish I read this book 3 years ago.
Well, I wish I had known about this a long time ago.
Yeah, right. Exactly. You have, I think I remember reading the 5 love languages. Is it right that came out like in the 90s? Is that right?
92.
Yeah,
this
okay.
year is the 30th year.
That's
Absolutely
amazing.
It is amazing. It amazes me.
I know.
And every year it continues to sell more than the year before, which also amazes me.
Yeah, it's still on the,
amazing.
well, I think it's near the top or one of the highest as far as when it comes to Christian literature, New York Times best-selling. So that's just amazing to me. I mean, that's just,
Yep.
Wow.
People ask me how do I explain that. I say, well, the short answer is God, and the long answer is God.
Right. Yeah. No kidding. So, talking about teenagers, what are some of the things that you wish you had known before, your kids were entering those teen years?
Well, I wish I had known that the human brain is changing in those teenage years. They're learning to think more logically. I didn't say they're logical. I said they are learning to think more logically, which means they're going to question things you've taught them for years. They'll start questioning those things. And, when they started doing that for me, I thought, wait a minute now, what are you talking about, man? We've taught this and we believe this our whole life. Why are you asking questions about this? I wish I'd known that the brain is changing. They're developing logical thought, which means they're thinking through things now. They're not just doing what you say. I think if I'd understood that, and that's positive, we want them to be able to think logically, and had worked with them in that, it would have made a whole difference. There would have been far fewer conflicts when they were asking questions. I would encourage the asking questions, and I would give what I could to answer. And if I didn't have an answer, I'd say, it's a great question. Why don't we try to find something that'll help us understand that better?
I'm glad you just said that, because I think one of the greatest challenges for us as parents is to slow down and really listen to our kids. We can ask them questions, but usually we know the answer, right? So we're right there to help it. I believe you call it effective listening. And so I'm so glad you brought us to that point. How do we go about assisting our teenagers to develop that logical thought process by listening?
Yeah, I think what we do is when they ask questions, we ask questions. Jesus often did that. When people ask him a question, he'd ask them a question. So I think if they're asking a question about anything, we say, well, that's an interesting question. What brought that question to your mind? Uh-huh. And they may say, well, there was a teacher said something about this, or one of my friends said this, or I heard this online, or whatever. Mm-hmm. And I said, well, that's a very interesting question. How would you answer it? Kind of throw it back to them and let them kind of tell you what they're thinking. Mm. And again, we affirm their thinking. You say, well, that's real. That's good thinking. Once they realize that you really are hearing what they're saying and affirming what they're saying, then you can give your perspective. And because they have felt understood, they're far more likely to hear your perspective. But if we don't hear them out and find out where the question's coming from and what they're really thinking about it at this juncture, then we just answer the question and tell them how illogical what they're thinking is. Then eventually they just stop sharing with us.
Right.
what they're thinking, what's going on. Yeah, and we lose out on an opportunity to impact them and help them develop logical thinking.
I think what we've already discussed already is helping a lot of parents, because I think when they're starting to question things, you take that personally, as in you're questioning my authority, but what you're describing that's not necessarily what's happening.
No, absolutely. What they're doing is following a normal thing that's happening in their brain, and that is the brain is changing. They are beginning to think logically. And listen, we want them to think logically because ultimately they have to make huge decisions in life. And the more we help them develop logical thought and look at the various angles on whatever something is and what's the source of the information that we're getting, both of us, the more we're going to help them come to a place where they're going to make wise decisions in life.
That's good.
Good. Mm-hmm. It's so good. I think we don't realize how little listening we're actually doing because, we know the wise way. It's funny because when the kids are growing up and they're learning to walk, we don't do the walking for them. In fact, we cheer them on when they fall down.
True.
But
absolutely.
As they're growing up and beginning to question things, I like what you said, Kent, because we just take personal offense.
Oh, absolutely. Hey, why you're saying that you think I don't know what I'm talking about?
And then the very thing that you don't want to have happen, Dr. Chapman, is for them to clam up, but that's what you've taught them to do, because why have a conversation when there's no conversation? Mom and Dad are just going to tell me how to do it.
Absolutely. I mean, this is huge. This is huge, and I didn't know this, before our kids became a teenager, and I was kind of, it was adversarial until I began to realize, if I'm going to help them, I've got to listen to them first. It's very similar to counseling. I mean, a counselor has to be a good listener before they share anything they think is going to be helpful. Because if the people don't think they've been heard, they're not going to hear what the counselor has to say. But the same thing is true in parenting. If the child feels heard, they're far more likely then to listen to what you have to say.
Good.
Yeah, I do think those conversations are so crucial. I remember my mom and my grandma and my grandpa, like, Misty Diane, what on earth is going on in that head of yours? With that tone, which I think, is a great question to ask. How is it that brain development factors into the decisions that a teenager makes? And, why is it so important for parents to, as you mentioned, not only have that conversation, but understand that brain development that's going on?
I think if they don't understand what is happening to the human brain during those teenage years, then they are going to be defensive. They are going to be, for the most part, dogmatic and come back and say, don't even be thinking like that. I mean, that's just totally foolishness, and we just cut them off and put them down. And now they walk away. They're still trying to figure all this out, but now they don't have a parent that's empathetic with what's going on in their mind. And so they basically stop talking. And the parent, and now we don't know what they're thinking, and we don't know where they're going in their mind. So far, far better to learn how to listen to them. And if you understand that their brain is changing, it should help you focus on listening to them. Another factor with the brain is that the emotional part of the brain in the teenage years is fluctuating. I mean, it's up and down, up and down, up and down. In the morning, they may be just real positive teenagers, In the afternoon, they come home and they're in the depths of it. Something happened today that impacted them, and now they're really down emotionally. And the parents are wondering, what's going on? That's why a good question to ask at dinner time tonight, and I hope parents have dinner with their kids. I hope they have dinner with their teenagers. Around the table is a good place to talk. But you got to have the TV off. You got to have the computers down. You're not answering phone. At dinner time, it's a time to do two things: eat and talk. First of all, we're going to talk to God and thank Him for the food.
Yep.
We're going to start eating and we'll talk to each other. And here's a good question to ask at the end of the day: what was real high point in your day today? What was something you really enjoyed today? And then what was something that happened today that kind of gave you a down feeling, just kind of discouraged you or made you just kind of feel down? if everybody's doing that around the table, mom and dad and kids too, the teenagers they'll get into that, and you'll learn what's going on. You'll learn why they're kind of down tonight because they'll tell you what happened, and then we can talk about it. I can understand how you'd feel that way. It makes a whole lot of sense. If I were in your shoes, I'd probably feel the same way you do, man. So how do we handle those kind of things? Now we start talking about how do we handle those kind of things. And maybe we can even remember back when something like that happened to us and how we felt and what we did. And we maybe say, I didn't handle it very well. But I've learned now. And so now we have a chance again to talk them through the ups and downs, emotional ups and downs that they're having in their life.
That's good. I think that I learned after a while of asking my 13-year-old son, how's your day going? You just don't get anything. But
no, it's fine. Fine.
Exactly.
What's going on?
Yep.
Nothing.
That's right. And so to actually give a high or low, you might actually get something concrete coming out of their mouth. I'm guessing every parent in every generation looks back on their childhood, realizing that children are, they're raising in a vastly different culture. All of us are. And kids these days, with social media being such a huge part of what's going on, how do you help them navigate through all that?
Yeah. Well, you are exactly right in that it is a huge difference in the culture since social media. I mean, when my kids were coming along years and years ago, all we had was television, television and radio. I mean, the phones are connected to the wall. You didn't have them in your pocket. So, it's a huge, huge difference. I think one of the things we do is emphasize the positive things. First of all, the positive things about technology. For example, you can know where your kid is. If they've got a cell phone, you can know where they are every minute of every day. And that teenager needs, if they have a cell phone, they need to know that you know where they are. So they can't hide from you.
Right. That's
you know
true.
their exact location. And the other thing is, you tell them, I'm not trying to just, keep up with you. I just want to make sure you're safe. In today's world, it's not a very safe world out there. I want to make sure you're safe. But at any rate, we emphasize the positive things that we can chit-chat with each other during the day. You can send a quick text if you left something at home and your parents can bring it to you or whatever. So there are a lot of positive things about it. But we also need to warn them about the negative aspects of social media. And people obviously say things on social media they would never say if they were face-to-face with that person. And so we talk to them about, we don't want to hurt somebody else or hurt their reputation by things we say on social media about them. So maybe you don't like them, maybe they hurt you, maybe whatever, but look, listen, we don't want to put other people down, because what we do, we start saying things about other people, they're going to start saying things about us. And all this stuff gets out there, and people hear things about you too. So, and we also, to warn them, people are going to say things about you that are going to be negative on social media. And one of the reasons that they're on social media is they feel like people like me. I've got friends. I've got 300 friends. or whatever. But that we're going to get embarrassed sometimes. And what we want to do is not do anything embarrassing on social media.
Right.
And then of course, being open with them about pornography, and open with them about sexting and all those negative aspects of things that do go on, and to let them know, this, we don't do this in our family. We don't do this thing, and you know that, and but to help them see the negative parts of all that. So, but again, they have to be thinking through it themselves. It's not just you do this, but we're telling them why, and we're trying to help them think so that they're making the decisions on what they're going to do and making good decisions.
Wow, that's powerful, trying to help them think. I love that. We're so anxious to think for them. You said something really powerful in your book. You said, hidden underneath the confusing behaviors of our teens is a desperate longing to feel loved. Before we get any deeper in this conversation, can you lead us through the basics of what the 5 love languages are?
I can, and I tell you, I believe this is so important.
Yes.
If the teenager does not feel loved, everything else in your relationship with them is going to be diminished.
Wow.
Because if they don't feel loved, they're not likely to listen to anything you're saying. And most parents do love their children. It's just natural to love your children.
Yeah.
But I can tell you, there's a lot of teenagers that do not feel loved. And the reason is the parents don't understand that what makes one person feel loved doesn't make another person feel loved. So I remember a 13-year-old who had run away from home, and he ended up in my counseling office. And he said to me, my parents don't love me. They love my brother, but they don't love me. I knew his parents. I knew they loved him, but they'd never learned the whole concept that each teenager has another love language. If you have 2 or 3 children, they probably have different love languages. So 5 basic ways to express love emotionally, to meet that emotional need. And these are in no particular order. But one is words of affirmation, using words to affirm them, looking for things that you can honestly make verbal positive affirmations about. It can be about the way they look. You know, I like your muscles, man. I mean, I can tell you've been working out. Or, I like that shot, man. That was a great shot. Or, hey, I saw you go over after the game and talk with John. I know he felt badly after he missed that shot. And I saw you go over and just give him a positive word. Man, that's good. That's what we always want to do, is give people positive words. If we think they're feeling down, just give them a positive word. But just looking for things about their character, or their personality, or their looks, or their behavior that you can genuinely affirm. And I encourage parents to affirm teenagers for their effort, not for perfection.
Oh, that's good.
I remember a teenager that said to me, when I said to him, how do you and your dad get along? He was in the hospital with stomach ulcers. And I was trying to find out what's going on. I said, how do you and your father get along? He said, I don't ever please my father. He said, if I make a B on my report card, my dad says, you should have made an A. You're smarter than this. Wow. He said, if I'm playing softball and I get a double, my dad will say, you should have made a triple out of that. You got to learn how to run. I understood what the father was trying to do. He was trying to motivate him to do his best. But you hear what the teenager was thinking, feeling.
Yeah.
I can't please my father. So you if they get a double, you praise them for the double, okay? It's next week you try to show them how to slide into the third and make a triple out of it. So words of affirmation. Secondly, these are, again, no particular importance, but second is acts of service. Doing something for the teenager that you know they would like for you to do. Maybe they would like for you to teach them how to cook a meal or how to bake a cake. Maybe they would like for them for you to help them with a math problem that they're having trouble with. Maybe they'd like to learn how to change a tire on a car in case they get stuck somewhere and the tire goes flat. But things that you can do for them that you know they would like for you to do for them. So it's not just doing things for them, it's also teaching them how to do things. That's a huge act of service. It takes a lot longer, for example, to teach a teenager how to cook a meal than it does to cook the meal for them.
True.
But if they're interested in learning how to cook a meal, that's huge. And my granddaughter could cook a full meal at the age of 14. She watched a cooking channel. She was into cooking, and she wanted her dad. Her dad's a good cook, and he taught her how to do all of it. It's just amazing. I was thinking to myself, girl, when you grow up, some man's going to have a good wife.
That's awesome.
So acts of service. There's an old saying that actions speak louder than words. And if this is their love language, actions will speak louder than words. You can just say, I love you, I love you, I love you. But if you don't ever do anything to help them, and this is their language, they won't feel love. And then there's gifts. Universal to give gifts as an expression of love. And the gifts don't have to be expensive, nor do we have to give the teenager everything they ask for. No. We're the parent. We give them gifts that we believe will be helpful for them. And they may be asking us for something we don't think they're ready for, and we're not going to give it to them. And so we just simply say, I can understand that you would like to have that. If I were in your shoes, I probably would like to have it also. But I just don't think at this time that's the best thing for you. So I'm not going to give it to you now because I love you. I love you too much to give it to you. I don't mean they'll be real happy with that. But when they see it's an act of love, you really are doing it because you believe it's best for them not to receive that now. In 2 years, I think that's a gift I'd really like to give you, but not now. But for some of them, this is gifts. And if gifts is their language, it's not that it costs a lot of money. You can pick up a stone in a city parking lot, give it to a 13-year-old, say, hey, man, I found this today and I thought about you. Look at the colors in here, man. I wanted you to have this. Because you knew he had an interest in stones. And if this is his love language, you'll find that stone in his dresser drawer when he's 23. And he'll remember the day you gave it to him.
Yep.
It's powerful. And it can be as simple as bringing home a little candy bar that you know is their favorite candy bar from when you go grocery shopping. It could be little things.
Love it.
And then quality time. Giving the other person your undivided attention. Oof. So that when you're having a conversation with the teenager, you're not multitasking with something else. You're not on your computer, while you're talking to them. No. Quality time is you giving them your full attention. And even if you're having a conversation and your phone rings and you answer the phone when you're talking to your teenager, and this is their language, I'm telling you, they're getting the idea. Somebody out there is more important to my dad or my mom than I am.
I think that last one there, I think there's a overwhelming feeling of conviction across the entire United States.
Wow. Yes.
And I now understand some parents are on call. They're medical doctors or emergency people, and then they just say, "Son, this is an emergency. I have to take it, but hang right here. As soon as I get through, I want to finish this conversation." So. We need to give, and quality time means giving them your full attention. And it doesn't always mean that you're talking. You can be simply doing something with them that they like to do. Maybe riding a bicycle with them or taking a walk, a hike with them. But they have your full attention when you're with them. And then number 5 is physical touch. And we've long known the emotional power of physical touch. So this is giving high fives and pats on the backs and at the right place and time hugs. During the teenage years, and here's a question I've had a lot. They said, Dr. Chapman, I read your book on children and the love language of children, and then I used it and found their love language. But now my child's become a teenager, and I'm trying to do the same thing I always did, and it doesn't seem to be working. Does their love language change? And I say, I don't think their love language changes. But you have to use new dialects because whatever you've been doing, they now consider childish. For example, when they were 10 years old and they were playing ball, you could go out on the field after it was over and give them a big old hug in front of everybody. They get to be teenagers, they're going to push you away. Don't do that, Mom. Don't do that.
Yep.
Don't do that.
Yep.
They still need to be touched, but at a different place, in private, not hugged in front of everybody else. So learning to make that transition to learning new dialects on the way you express these languages as they get to be teenagers, you're doing more adult things rather than what they consider to be childish things.
That is really good.
So I'm thinking about some of the special circumstances of parenting, single parents, grandparents as caregivers. In my own life, my husband and I have a dream of fostering foster to adopting an older child. How is it that we can best prepare for raising a teenager?
Yeah. Well, I think first of all, if you're going to be, foster care and adopting children in your family who are not biological children, you first need to understand that understanding the love languages and just assuming that if their love language is physical touch, I'll just hug them and they're going to bond with me. And that's not true, because a biological child has an emotional bond with the biological parent that they don't have with the parent who's a step parent. And so what you have to recognize is, yes, you want to know their love language, but you have to begin to speak it incrementally. For example, if physical touch is their language, don't just start hugging them when they get there. Now, if they're little kids, little babies, you can start hugging. But I mean, if they're teenagers or older, children, you might have to start with fist bumps. Fist bump and a positive word. Hey, man, I like that. Yeah. And you may have to do fist bumps for a couple months. And then you can start patting them on the back. And then you get a little, and it may take several months before they're ready to receive a hug from you. Because you might hug them, when you first bring them into your family, you might hug them, and they might just stiffen up, and they don't hug you back. to get stiffened up, and you can feel like they want you to let them go, you know. So don't feel badly about that. That's just normal. That we have to build the emotional bond with a stepchild, someone that we've adopted or a foster child. We have to build that bond over time. It doesn't happen immediately because they have a bond with somebody else somewhere, you know, their biological parent. You know, I mean, if they're about, and then many times if they're coming in as foster children, we're adopting them. Maybe we're going to adopt them. They've had 2 or 3 foster parents, so we don't know what that child has been through. But I think part of the conversation, especially if it's a child that's older or nearing teenage years, is to let them tell you about their past. I don't mean you say to them, "Tell me about your past," you know, but you say, "What do you remember when you were 3 years old, or 4 years old, or 5 years old? What do you remember?" And they begin to tell you, and when you start asking them, they'll later will get to ask you questions. What were you like when you were a teenager? You know, did your mom and dad, were they your biological parents, or were you adopted? You know, they'll start. You get conversation going, but they will eventually, as you ask questions and they see you're really interested, they will reveal the pain or the hurt that they felt, you know, before they got to you, and you can say to them, you know, man, I can see how that would be really hard. You know, I'm sure if I were in your place, man, I would have probably felt the same way you feel. It's those kind of statements that helps that teenager realize you hear them, you understand them. And that statement of, I would probably feel the same way you did when if I were you, that speaks volumes to them. So, you know, that I think those are some of the key things when you're taking in a child that's not your biological child.
It's good.
Sounds like time and patience.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. Dr. Gary, you know, when it comes to technology, most kids love it. Is there some pitfalls to it, or are there some benefits that we can use technology with our children?
Yeah, I think, you know, technology has invaded our families, no question about that. And it's not just the children, it's also the parents. I mean, how many times do we as adult parents look at our phone during the day?
Yep.
You know, even if you have it on vibrate and you feel that little vibration, something says, pick it up, you know?
Exactly. Yep.
So we're almost all addicted to our phones as adults. And our children have even a greater temptation to be addicted because, well, like, for example, with video games, just to take one area.
Yep.
The video games gives them feedback, you know, and they've won, they've got this score, then they get this score, and it's giving them positive feedback. It's making them feel good. And so eventually, every free minute they have, they play in a video game. And if that happens through the whole teenage years, they'll carry that into adulthood. And they'll be playing video games when they're 23. Now, there's nothing wrong with video games. Well, some video games I wouldn't. But video games themselves not necessarily bad.
Right.
But there needs to be limits. Teenagers thrive on limits, on boundaries.
Well, wait a second. That sounds really weird. You would think that. That sounds so counterintuitive.
I know. Because we just think, listen, if you simply let a teenager do anything they want to do whenever they want to do it, by the time they get to the middle teenage years and the later teenage years, they're going to be bored to death. And I think this is one of the reasons that we have such a rise in teenage depression and sometimes now teenage suicides, is because they've tried everything and nothing makes any sense anymore to them. So, you know, let's say we have dinner together every night, which I think is a huge factor in raising teenagers, that we're going to try to have dinner. When our kid was coming along, our son was in basketball. So we sometimes had dinner at 4 o'clock in the afternoon. Sometimes we had dinner at 8 o'clock after the game. So, but we were willing to switch it, but we always wanted to have dinner together. And so it's going to be a time that we're going to share life with each other. And we're going to talk about our day, and maybe every night just throw out a question that everybody can answer. What do you think about this question? Just throw it out there. and they learn to talk with their family, which is a huge skill in terms of their future success, learning to carry on conversations with people.
Yeah.
And so that during the dinner time, it's a screen-free time. We don't do screens. And also, I think it's a good idea, each parent has to decide for themselves, that we don't take our cell phone into our bedroom at night. The cell phones, all of our phones, are put in a box at night. Otherwise, you don't know what they're going to be doing in that room with that cell phone. They can get into all kinds of things in that room. We say there's two things you can do in your room. You can read a book, or you can sleep, whichever one you want to do.
That's good.
Okay?
Yeah.
For one thing, that's
Giving
going
them
to
a
help
choice.
them learn. It's going to make them a reader, and readers are going to do better than people that don't read. I don't care where they go, because they're going to be learning things constantly if they're readers. Now, if you start that young with the children, you just follow it right into the teenage years. If you've never done it before, and now they're moving in the teenage years, they're going to balk at that. No, what do you mean? Can't what was all blah, blah, blah.
Yeah, because you rip
And
the
again,
carpet
you
out
say,
underneath them,
Yeah, that's right. And again, you say, I can understand that. But, I really value you. I really love you. And I've observed too many teenagers who've gotten into serious problems because they've got that phone in the room and they stumbled across things that they shouldn't be looking at. And it was so enticing that they got pulled into it and got sucked into it. And we're just going to have boundaries in our family. And that's one of our boundaries we're going to have, that we don't take the phones into our bedroom. And they'll fuss about it a while, but eventually they'll accept it. They'll accept it, and you've served them a great service. You see, sometimes parents have ideas on boundaries, but when the teenager kind of pushes back against it and speaks loudly to them, gets angry with them, rather than helping them process the anger and saying, for example, I can understand how you'd be angry about this, because if I were in your shoes, I'd probably feel angry just like you do. But I'm a parent. And parents are older than teenagers, and hopefully we have a little more wisdom. And we are the authorities in the home. We're responsible for your well-being, and so we have some guidelines and some rules that we're going to follow because we believe it's best for you. We love you too much just to simply let you do everything you want to do.
Yeah.
And they'll especially if you're speaking their love language, they'll begin to see that it is an act of love from you. Yeah.
As the parent, you've got to do the work too, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. We have to set the model for that, because we don't go answering our phone, if in the times that we've agreed that are going to be non-phone times.
Sure.
Yeah.
And
That's good.
Yeah. Hey, as we're beginning to wind up, I have to ask, in the teen years, kids often begin to develop their own beliefs, particularly religious beliefs. How can we help guide our kids into this important area and have our teens anchored in their faith?
Yeah, let me say, first of all, I think that realizing that teens need guidance in the spiritual area, just like they do in every other area of life. And, there's some parents who say, well, I just don't want to predispose my children to religious beliefs. I'm just going to, let them decide what they want to believe. Well, those parents typically don't have strong religious beliefs themselves.
True. Yeah,
but what happens if you don't influence your spouse in the spiritual realm, somebody else will. Because as a human, deep within us, there is that sense that there's more to life than what can be seen. And so throughout life, people are going to grapple with this idea, is there a God, and who is he, and what has he said, and all of this. And so, again, in this area, teenagers are beginning to develop logical thought. So, yes, they're going to question things. Maybe you brought them up in a church their whole life, and they will begin to question things that you have taught them or things that they've heard at church. And see that as good, because eventually they have to make their decision. You can't make the decision for them to follow Christ for them. They have to make it for themselves. And if you're empathetic with their questions and thank them for asking the question, and then try to point them in directions that will give them some help in that, you'll walk with them through the process. For example, if they have a question about different religions, or why is Christianity, the truth, and others are not the truth, and so you if you don't know books that you can put in their hands, ask your pastor or your youth minister at church, what books do you recommend that I could give my teenage son who's asking this question? Because there are good books out there, that you can put in their hands that they can read. And so it's not just you telling them, there's an outside voice. There's someone else speaking into their life as well. But helping them walk through. I remember my son came home from the first year in college, and he said, Dad, give me something serious to read on Christianity.
Oh, wow.
Okay. So I gave him a Francis Schaeffer book, The God Who Is There. He read it, and he came back and said, has he written anything else, Dad? I said, oh, yeah, he has. And so I gave him another book, that Schaeffer had written. Then I gave him Josh McDowell's Evidence That Demands a Verdict. Man, he worked through those things, and he went back to college and took a philosophy course, and now he was man, it was helping him. What he had read was helping him process what he was hearing, So, we need to walk through them. But I would say this too: our model in our own spiritual journey is more important even than our words. If they see us living out what we say we believe, they're far more likely to accept what we're saying. But if they see us saying we believe one thing, but they see in us that we're not following through with what we say we believe, it's harder for them to respect what we have to say. So that's why our journey with God and our personal walk with God needs to be personal. And we need to be spending time every day as a parent reading a chapter in the Bible and saying, God, I'm listening to you, and I want to hear you, and underline things that look interesting. Go back and talk to God about it. I mean, our walk with God needs to be daily.
Amen.
And they see us reading the Bible and doing that. We're taking it seriously, and they see it affects us in the way we treat them. For example, if we lose our temper and yell at them, and we come back and apologize, and we say, son, I want to apologize. A father should never talk to a son the way I talk to you. And, we're doing what God said. You sin, you confess your sin, you apologize. Sometimes people have said to me when I say that, well, if you apologize to your kids, won't they lose respect for you? No, they gain respect.
Absolutely.
They already know what you did was wrong.
Yep, you're right.
So, we have to not only love them, we have to also deal with our failures, and that means we apologize to them and we ask for their forgiveness.
That's good.
And that's what the way they learn how to apologize when they do wrong, and we forgive them. So yeah.
Good stuff.
Rich.
Well, Dr. Gary, we probably held you long enough, but thank you so much for your time, your wisdom, your guidance. I think you're helping a lot of people already.
Well, thank you. I really feel like that this book will help those parents, especially those their children are getting ready to go into teenage years, or if they're already there, it'll help you too. But my hope is they'll read it when the kid is 11 or 12 years old, getting ready to move into teenage years, so that they have some of these things in mind before they get there. That's my desire for this book.
That's great. Good stuff.
So good.